Get ops on now. What the hell is going on with latency? That was the first line I saw when I switched over from Grafana to Slack, still cradling my chipped blue mug of jasmine tea. It was nearly 11:42 p.m. on a Thursday. We weren't scheduled for any deployments. Load balancing was coasting smoothly at 86% efficiency. No alerts had triggered, no diffs had been approved. I tapped my fingers against the desk, watching the Slack threads erupt in pings and panic. One of our core clients, Weston Dynamics, was reporting dropped packets and intermittent timeout errors. Their CTO was looped in. Their QA lead, our VP of sales, was typing, deleting, typing again. And then came Danny Rivera, our newly minted COO with the charm of a human LinkedIn post and the subtlety of a throne chair, barged into the war room chat like she was directing a Marvel finale. Where's Emily? Why hasn't rollback been initiated? I was already 3 steps ahead, tracing the packet flow back through our usual edge node suspects, isolating a weird reroute that looked like it bypassed normal traffic. It didn't match anything in the morning's build. Emily, respond. She didn't wait, didn't breathe, just tagged me again like I was ignoring a fire alarm. I'm here, I typed calmly, investigating anomaly, no confirmed prod changes on my end, reviewing logs. Which I was. Because unlike Danny, I don't scream at shadows before I know where the light source is while we're in it. If you're one of the 97% of folks who listens to these stories but hasn't hit subscribe yet, now's your moment. It helps more than you know, and it means we get to keep digging into these kinds of chaos under pressure stories. So tap subscribe, drop a like, and let's keep moving. Now, back to the disaster. There's a protocol to this. When you work in ops, real ops, not buzzword ops, you learn to keep your hands still until the logs speak, and mine were starting to murmur. There was a timestamp mismatch. Someone had pushed something, but it didn't route through staging. No Jenkins tag, no shadow diff, just a subtle nudge to a backend config file that looked eerily fresh. I squinted. Commit Sinani 8417, authored 9 minutes before Weston's first alert. That commit wasn't mine. And it sure as hell wasn't authorized by me, but Danny didn't care about commits or audit trails. She'd already joined the Zoom crisis call, and before I even finished typing out the potential source of the anomaly, she shouted over everyone like a toddler slamming kitchen pots together. Emily broke everything. Our pipeline is a mess because of her delays. Her voice cracked through my headset, the kind of loud that makes you instinctively flinch. And before I could say a word, she muted me. Muted me. On a live crisis call with Weston's Toe, our legal team, and half of our revenue chain listening in, I sat there staring at my own stunned expression reflected faintly in the terminal window. The cursor blinked at me like it couldn't believe it either. My tea was cold now. So was my spine. That's when I decided. I wouldn't defend myself with words. Danny wanted a war of noise. I'd give her silence, with timestamps. I toggled to the Git repo, filtered by commit time, pulled the author metadata. A marketing side junior dev, not even listed in ops rotation, tagged with elevated permissions, approved by Danny Rivera. I took a screenshot. No commentary, no hashtags, no heat, just one clean, unfiltered truth. I dropped it into Slack and waited. The graphs didn't climb. They spiked. Violently, like someone slammed a brick on the gas and ripped the steering wheel off mid-freeway. Latency shot up 240% in under a minute. Weston's customer-facing API endpoint started throwing 503s like it was a clearance sale. And that's when the second alert hit. Not from our internal systems. Those were still playing catch-up. It was Weston's CTO himself, flagged our dev hotline with one line. Who pushed to prod in the last 10 minutes? My stomach dropped, because I hadn't. And no one in ops had authorization to push that late anyway. We had staging windows for a reason. So I opened the packet logs, my eyes scanning for routing inconsistencies. Something was off. A subtle shift in traffic origin. Too sudden to be environmental, too clean to be a random node error. I checked yesterday's deployment diff. The build hash didn't match the live environment. Someone had replaced a config. Not a whole deployment, just a sliver of back-end logic tied to Weston's customer lookup endpoints, the kind of tweak you'd make if you thought you were being clever, or if you didn't know what the hell you were doing. I was seconds from typing the alert when Zoom clicked open. Danny's face filled the screen before the call even fully connected, a blur of filtered lighting, high-end webcam angles, and pure executive panic disguised as confidence. "Emily," she snapped. "What the hell is happening? Why aren't you containing this?" I stayed steady, currently tracing a mismatch between yesterday's deployment and current prod hash. Oh my god, stop with the jargon. Just fix it, she snapped again, cutting me off. Then to the room, she declared, "This is exactly what I warned the board about. Old process, no urgency. We need faster hands on this." Faster hands. From the woman who bypassed staging to save time by greenlighting unauthorized test accounts with production access. I muted myself before I said something regrettable. Inside Slack, Weston's internal audit team had already begun sniffing around. They were fast, organized, and not about to let $400,000 worth of outage downtime slide into the category of oopsie. They asked for logs, API header trails, approval records, and a full staging to prod commit map. I gave them everything, quietly, thoroughly, without commentary. I attached my flag report from 2 days ago where I'd warned about a sudden access change request, one that had skipped security check and hadn't been signed off by anyone in ops. It was ignored. Buried under Danny's expedited adjustments list. The CTO replied within 5 minutes. "Can you confirm no one from your team approved this?" I replied with one line. "No one from operations authorized this push." I knew what I was looking at. A clean paper trail, one Danny never expected anyone to check. The real kicker? The dev who triggered it didn't even have proper onboarding finished. Marketing side junior, barely 6 weeks in. Someone Danny fast-tracked because they had product intuition. And that's when the data told the rest of the story. Push timestamp, 11:33 p.m. Failure trigger, 11:42 p.m. Rollback window missed, 11:45 p.m. Because Danny locked me out of the decision tree, I started building a snapshot log. Labeled everything. Included every decision tree override and escalated permission call. Because I wasn't just trying to survive this fire, I was documenting the entire ignition sequence. And I wasn't the only one watching now. Across the Slack grid, Weston's lead backend engineer dropped a comment I'll never forget. "Just a note, our team pulled the commit hash. Doesn't match ops, doesn't even match staging. Someone went straight to prod with test-level logic. Looking forward to hearing who authorized that." The silence after that message hit harder than anything Danny had screamed. My mouth was open when the mute hit. Mid-sentence, mid-breath, mid-explanation. 1 second I was calmly describing a non-authorized commit and staging bypass, and the next, the red microphone icon lit up and I was silenced in front of 15 people, half of whom outranked me and all of whom could make or break our client relationships. Danny didn't even blink. She took my pause, my forced silence, as her cue to perform. "Well, now you see the problem," she said, with that sing-song, passive-aggressive executive tone that makes you want to rip your headset in half. Legacy operations processes, outdated rollback procedures, and a lack of agility. This isn't the first time our systems have been slow to adapt, but I promise everyone here, I'll handle this personally. Handle this personally, like it was her brave sacrifice to clean up after the peasant who dared ask for protocol adherence. In the corner of my screen, Weston's CTO, Rodrigo Alston, tilted his head. Just a little. Just enough. He wasn't typing. He wasn't smiling. He was absorbing. Logging. I couldn't speak. I couldn't type into the Zoom chat either. Danny had locked permissions. But Slack was still live. So while Danny monologued about modernization, I uploaded a thread into the ops channel, just for internal folks, timestamped and linked. One screenshot of the git commit, one log export, one screenshot of the flag I'd submitted 48 hours prior with the subject line, unverified access elevation request, dev, test, profile. I didn't add commentary. Commentary is for people trying to prove they're right. Logs don't need spin, they just need air. Danny was still talking. She brought up scalability, real-time responsiveness, eliminating bottlenecks, which I guess is how she now framed removing staging review and rubber stamping a junior marketing dev's request to tweak the UX response header logic on Weston's client queue. A tweak that pushed a recursive call to a deprecated endpoint, one our load balancer never learned to ignore. She was naming me too, on record, loud and clear. This entire incident stems from a failure to embrace faster iteration. Our ops lead, Emily Tran, has been resistant to real-time change models, which is exactly why I've been pushing for a more adaptive team. We can't let cautiousness cost us clients. I felt the flush crawl up my neck. It wasn't the insult. It was the weaponization of silence. She knew I couldn't respond, and everyone just sat there, Legal stayed muted. Product stayed muted. Even the junior engineer Danny had championed was staring at his camera like he wanted to disappear into it. But I wasn't flinching anymore. I pulled open my documentation suite, revisited every override in the last 6 weeks tied to Danny's Slack account, highlighted the 4 marked urgent, bypass required, exported a new diff trail comparing our current prod hash against staging. There were 6 discrepancies, all outside ops approval. Then I drafted the file Weston's TIA would inevitably request, a root cause initiation matrix with embedded source links and event correlation logs. I didn't have the title for it yet, but I already had the closing line in my head. Final trigger commit approved by non-ops executive override, unauthorized use of elevated credentials initiated cascade. When the call finally ended, Danny's last words were, "I'll be following up with board-side stakeholders directly." Of course she would. I closed Zoom, opened Notion, clicked into my if shit hits the fan folder, and began documenting everything. The commit sat there like a bloodstain on a wedding dress. Timestamp, 11:33 p.m. Label, small tweak to optimize customer queue flow. Author, Tyler Dev Branch, hotfix or Livus adjustment. Pushed directly to production. No code review, no staging, no CI checks, no automated rollback buffer. Just raw, naked arrogance in the form of a one-line change that pulled a deprecated logic call from a 3-month-old UX experiment that had already been buried in our bug tracker under permanently retired. I didn't need to run a full diff. I already knew what it had touched. Weston's dynamic queue handler. The thing their entire customer API depended on during peak load hours. The logic Tyler patched in was recursive, and not in a smart way. In the let's create an infinite loop that bounces calls between stale endpoints kind of way. 9 minutes later, Weston started burning. I flagged Tyler's name. He wasn't even part of ops. He wasn't on the deployment access sheet. He'd been added by Danny's override just 2 weeks prior under the internal note, "Exception granted, UX Agility Initiative." I'd flagged that, loudly, filed the risk, emailed the override, no reply, just a Slack thumbs up from Danny and a closed ticket. I pulled up the Git interface and selected the view by author. There it was. Tyler Dev, last seen in marketing's dev sandbox, never graduated through the official rotation, never cleared for production. And yet here he was, painting a bomb onto our production infrastructure like a toddler with a flamethrower. I hovered over the screen for a long moment. My face was calm, but inside it was surgical rage. Not screaming rage, not soap opera rage. That cold, meticulous fury you only feel when someone burns your house down and hands you the lighter with a smile. I clipped the window. Just enough. Not doctored, not cluttered. Just. The commit hash, the timestamp, the author, the direct-to-prod path, and Danny's override tag, no extra commentary, no emotional color, just raw, sterile fact. Then I opened Slack, dropped the screenshot in Howard Ops War Room under a simple header, commit timeline, pre-crash deployment trace. That was it. No tag, no emoji, no defensive monologue, because this wasn't about saving face anymore. This was about truth. And the truth didn't need my voice, just my receipts. Within seconds, Weston's senior back-end engineer reacted with the eyeball emoji, then the flame, then silence. 10 seconds after that, Rodrigo, the CTO, posted in the thread, confirming this pushed live before the cascade. I didn't reply. I just posted the Jenkins build log. There was no build, no job, no staging, just Tyler, raw pushing code into the beating heart of our infrastructure like a goddamn maniac with admin rights. The reactions didn't matter. The Slack thread didn't matter. What mattered was this. The truth was no longer trapped in my mouth. It was out. It had weight. It had timestamps. And it was starting to bleed into the minds of everyone watching. Danny could shout until her vocal cords snapped, but the logs were louder, and I wasn't done documenting. Not yet. Rodrigo didn't ask twice. His first message after the commit screenshot dropped was direct, almost surgical. Full access logs from last 24 hours, and rollback history from prod, now. There were no pleasantries, no soft edges, just a command that meant, I already know someone's lying, and I'm here to surgically remove the cancer. I didn't hesitate. I opened our observability stack, pulled the elevated access trace, wrapped it in a version-locked archive with checksum signatures, and sent him the download link. 3 minutes later, I sent the secondary payload my original flag report. Subject, unauthorized role elevation Tyler Dev. filed 48 hours before the outage, included full staging exclusion trace, sandbox permissions list, and final audit notes. Attached. Danny's Slack approval to bypass ops review, every field filled, every line time stamped, every flag ignored, no commentary needed. I just wrote attached, full trace, root cause notes highlighted. Rodrigo's only reply was a thumbs up emoji, followed by running cross check now, then silence. But not the kind that felt like punishment. It was that electric pause, when the fuse is lit and you're waiting for detonation. I watched our internal Slack light up. Danny wasn't responding now. Not to legal, not to product, not to Weston, because Rodrigo was speaking with data now, not with her. 15 minutes later, Weston's back-end lead posted in #ops escalation. Your logs are clean, confirmed. Everything matches time-stamped protocol. And then, the commit path is clearly an anomaly, cross-referencing now. I leaned back in my chair, let my shoulders finally drop, not from relief. This wasn't over, but from that quiet internal recognition that the tide had turned. I wasn't defending myself anymore. I was guiding a forensic reconstruction of the fire Danny lit and blamed on me. They pulled session IDs, they pulled API call chains, they matched system logs with Slack threads. Every entry I'd made was there, no gaps, no delays, and every warning, time-stamped and disregarded. Weston's lead SRE dropped a final note. Appreciate the clarity and structure. We're replicating your trace internally. They weren't just auditing, they were adopting my documentation to clean up the mess Danny left. Meanwhile, Danny stayed quiet. Her executive Slack icon stayed gray. No apologies, no explanations. I didn't need them. Because somewhere on a quiet screen in Weston's war room, Rodrigo was staring at the same Git commit log I had, watching Danny's name sit beneath an override approval she would have sworn never happened. The shift had begun, not because I shouted, not because I fought, because I wrote everything down. Every single time. The email subject line hit like a slow, controlled exhale. Preliminary audit results. Weston Systems incident. Rodrigo CC'd legal, 2 senior infrastructure leads, our head of product, Danny, and me. No extra commentary, just a zipped archive and a note that said, findings attached, line 32. Line 32. Buried inside a plain text summary in that clean, bureaucratic language audits use when they're quietly sharpening the guillotine. Commit Sinamani 8417 was initiated by Tyler Ma Dev, a test environment account not cleared for production access. Elevated credentials granted via override by COO D. Rivera without secondary authorization from operations. There it was, 9 lines down. Ops engineer E-Trans credentials were not involved. No staging sign-off recorded. Staging bypass flag present in commit header. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh, so I just blinked at the screen. My tea, refilled twice and still untouched, had gone cold again. Bittersweet isn't even the word for it. Because sure, I was vindicated. The truth was out, documented, confirmed by a third party. But they'd watched me burn for it first. Mute button and all. They'd let Danny pin it on me, live in front of our biggest client, and nobody spoke up. Now the same people who stayed quiet were reacting with emojis in Slack like they'd always known. Like this audit confirmed what they suspected. Please. Rodrigo didn't sugarcoat it either. On the call that followed, his voice was calm, clipped, lethal. We ran credential comparisons across all activity logs. Tyler's account was only authorized for test and sandbox environments. Someone granted him root-level prod access. That escalation didn't come through ops. A pause. You could hear the air tense through the mic. Emily, he said, can you confirm whether this elevation ever appeared in your chain of sign-off? I unmuted for the first time in over 24 hours. My voice was quiet. No, sir. I flagged the request and noted it required formal security review. It was marked resolved and closed without my signature. Rodrigo hummed once. No anger, just certainty. We thought so. Thank you. Then he pivoted, sharp as a scalpel. Danny, do you recall initiating this override? Danny didn't answer. And the silence said everything. Her webcam stayed off. Her profile picture, a perfectly curated black and white headshot, suddenly looked more like an obituary than a badge of power. I kept my face neutral. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, cold. I wasn't angry anymore, not even humiliated, just tired. Because while everyone else was reacting like this was some wild twist, I'd been holding the receipt the whole time, and no one had wanted to see it until the house was already on fire. They only cared now because it scorched the client's budget, not mine. By the end of the call, the tone had shifted completely. Rodrigo asked if I'd be willing to provide a detailed incident response framework for future prevention. Not Danny, not product, me. And when legal asked who currently owned production override permissions, I was the one who pulled up the access control sheet. Danny's name was still there. I highlighted it, hovered my cursor. Didn't remove it, not yet. But I was holding the key now. And everyone on that call knew it. No yelling, no finger pointing, no muting. The second war room call was all quiet breathing and tense mouse clicks. Everyone was there. Same faces, different energy. Legal looked like they hadn't slept. Product leads were blinking like they'd just come out of surgery. Even the usually smug VP of sales kept his camera off this time. I sat in the corner of the Zoom grid, same chair, same headset, same calm hands on the keyboard. But this time, nobody interrupted me. Rodrigo joined 5 minutes late, just long enough to make everyone nervous. He didn't say hello. He shared his screen. A black terminal window popped up. He typed a command, pulled the Git log, scrolled, stopped. There it was. The commit. #Sinamani8417 time 11:33 p.m. Author Tyler Matt Dev. Push master branch access direct prod. Rodrigo unshared for a beat. When he came back on screen, he looked directly into the camera, his voice smooth and calm, like a surgeon holding the scalpel an inch from skin. Who touched prod 9 minutes before a $400,000 outage? You could hear a pin drop. Nobody answered. I didn't need to. I'd already answered the only way I ever do. Clean logs, early warnings, documented flags. The name sat in the air like a virus. Tyler's. It wasn't just the name, it was the context. He wasn't ops. He wasn't cleared. He wasn't even trained on prod logic. And someone handed him root access like a party favor. Danny didn't unmute. Her camera stayed dark. Rodrigo continued, slower now. Who granted an override without staging, QA, or sign-off from the operations chain? Silence. The head of infrastructure from our side cleared his throat, but said nothing. Legal scribbled something in a notebook and looked like they were trying not to exist. Finally, Product's lead engineer, Ben, who had stayed annoyingly neutral up to now, leaned forward, his face pale. Danny, he said quietly, like he was trying to say it before someone else had to. The override came through your Slack request, right? Still nothing, so Rodrigo pressed, not louder, just firmer. Is Danny Rivera on the call? It was surgical, not hostile, just precise. Still silence. Her Zoom tile flickered for a second, then blinked off, disconnected. I watched the little red, left the meeting icon flash beside her name. No goodbye, no defense, no explanation. Just gone. Rodrigo didn't comment on it. He simply turned back to the group. We'll be requesting formal audit control changes, starting with a separation of environments between marketing and operations. Then, we also recommend removing all non-essential override permissions, effective immediately. He didn't say my name, but he didn't have to. He was speaking to me now. Not the room, not the board, me. And for the first time since the whole mess started, I leaned forward, not to fight, not to gloat, to take back the controls. The shame wasn't mine anymore. It never had been. The request from legal came in at 6:12 a.m. Sharp, formal, short, no apology, just a header. Subject, root cause analysis and process control audit. Due EOD. I opened it in the same chair I'd sat in for every deployment watch shift. Same tea, same cracked mug. Except this time, I wasn't logging risks. I was writing history. I built the RCA from the ground up. No AI summaries, no templates, just line-by-line incident breakdown, event correlation, and system impact. I embedded Slack timestamps, Git diffs, Jenkins gaps, and credential logs. Every override, every closed flag, every moment where the system trusted the wrong hands because someone above me decided caution was an inconvenience. At the top of the doc, I typed the title carefully, Root Cause and Preventive Chain Rework, Prod Incident 1117. Then beneath it, in plain language, incident was initiated by unauthorized commit to production environment by unapproved personnel, escalated via non-operational override. The resulting cascade led to a 74-minute outage affecting Weston Systems' Tier 1 API layer. Estimated cost, $417,200. I didn't bold it, didn't highlight, I didn't need to. The data carried the weight. By noon, I had 3 new meetings on my calendar. One was from legal, labeled Access Controls Review. Another was from the board's Oversight Liaison. No subject, just a name, Emily Tran. And the third, tagged high priority, was from the CTO's office, Weston's CTO. All 3 wanted the same thing: the new chain, rollback, sign off, access, approval, monitoring. No more executive bypasses, no more side door prod entries, no more fast track devs overriding people who actually carry the system on their backs at 2 a.m. The funny part? I didn't raise my hand for any of it. They asked me, the one Danny muted, the one who broke everything. Now I was writing the rules. Tyler, the marketing dev, was gone by the end of the day. Internal HR phrased it as a reassignment of contract, but everyone knew what that meant. His Slack account disappeared before the ink dried on the RCA. And Danny, her name was no longer on the access log master sheet. Someone else did it. I didn't even have to click. But I did see the audit trail update. Permission group, prod override, modified by admin, on behalf of board directive. She wasn't fired, not yet, but she was out of operations. Stripped from access, stripped from command. The war room she'd once steamrolled through like a wrecking ball, now hosted by the same engineers she used to talk over. Her calendar disappeared from shared view. Her initiatives paused pending structural realignment. I didn't gloat. There wasn't anything to celebrate. What she broke didn't just cost a client $400,000, it cost our entire system its integrity. Now I was rebuilding it. One permission, one chain of custody, one staging checkpoint at a time. Not because I wanted revenge, because someone had to. And this time, they finally stopped talking long enough to listen. The remediation document went live on a gray Tuesday morning, tucked between a product stand-up and a finance sync no one cared about. It didn't come with a press release. No internal party, no banner across Slack. Just a quiet Confluence link titled, Postmortem, Prod Incident number 1107, Final Version, Board Signed. I clicked it open like I was brushing dust off a headstone. My own name sat on the byline, no edits, no omissions. At the top of the document, before the diagnostics, before the diff trails, before the blast radius calculation, sat the line I'd written without flinching. Trigger event. Commit number 8417 by redacted. Approved by interim ops authority, bypassed staging. No defense, no names in bold, just fact. Cold and time-stamped. In the remediation actions list, I'd assigned myself the final task. Update access protocol, remove legacy override group. It took 12 seconds. I opened the permissions console, typed in Danny's name, selected prod override, clicked remove. The screen refreshed. Her access disappeared like it had never been there. I leaned back, let the cursor blink on an empty field. No music played, no victory pop-up, just silence. The good kind. The kind that follows something done right. The client retained their contract. No penalty, no reduction. But there was a new clause now, quietly embedded in Weston's updated vendor protocol. I helped draft it. All production-level changes must be reviewed and authorized exclusively by personnel within the operations division. No marketing, product, or executive exceptions permitted. It was signed, sealed, and initialed by their CTO, legal, and ours. Permanent. That was the real win. Not the headlines, not the Slack emojis. The system worked again. Later that evening, I closed my laptop and poured a fresh cup of tea, still in that same old mug with the cracked handle. Slack pinged once. A DM from someone at Weston. Infralead, I think. One line. No emojis, no fluff, just never mute the person holding the logs. I smiled, just a little, no one saw it. Then I shut the lid and let the system keep breathing on its own.